Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of The Circuit. I am Ben Bajarin.
Greetings, programs. I am Jay Goldberg.
So this was a GTC week, which, I ironically find interesting that this is called the Graphics Technology Conference, and it is no longer about graphics. It was all about AI, robotics, and fully self-autonomous driving cars, essentially. Nothing about graphics anymore. Well, maybe Nvidia might want to rename it. Who knows? I don't know. But regardless, my other takeaway was this show is much too large for San Jose. It was a freaking disaster. They need to host GTC somewhere else, probably Las Vegas, because there were so many people. 25,000-ish people is not an unrealistic number that showed up for these sessions. It was crazy. It may very well be one of the busiest single company shows I think I've ever seen, to be honest with you.
It's Geek Prom. It is the social event of this season for our very small, very strange circle.
Yes.
Geek Prom.
It was great fun. Honestly, it was super fun. So we're going to get into that. So let's start with some of our main takeaways. Let's go Keynote, and then there's a couple of very specific things I want to talk about from the Jensen QAs that I was in. All right. So you start from the Keynote. What hit you?
Okay. So I'll tell you, we're friends. I feel like I'm comfortable sharing this with you. This week has been an emotional roller coaster for me. I've been all over the emotional map when it comes to Nvidia. Right.
Okay.
Because we started with the Keynote, and you and I were sharing comments about this. It seemed a little bit low energy. Certainly disappointed the street. Stock was down. Just was, didn't feel great. So I was thinking about what we talked about 2 weeks ago. Is this peak Nvidia? I kind of downbeat. And then I started reading about it, and I listened to, I think Ben Thompson on Stratechery had some good points about it. And then I started to feel a little better. Then I listened to the investor Q&A that Jensen did, and I was like, oh, all right. There's the Jensen we know. A little bit feeling good now. And then I went to the show. Today's Friday, March 21st. I went on the last day. With limited hours, the show was packed. It took me 20 minutes waiting in line just to pick up my badge on the last day of the show. And the crowd, to your point, was really crowded. I mean, it was like CES level density, bumping into everybody no matter where you went. Really, really crowded. And so I was like, all right, we're back. Nvidia to the moon. And then from that sort of first 15 minutes in the show onwards, every minute I spent there, I just became more and more disillusioned and curmudgeonly.
So wait. So you ended the show curmudgeonly.
Yeah. Because I think what the moment that really broke my brain was I was in the back of the show where the Nvidia booth was, and they had a separate section for hardware and software. And I was walking by the hardware section, showing all the new racks, the DGX and the Vera and Rubin were there. And there was a line to get in. Like, it was roped off, and you had to wait in line for 20 minutes just to get in up close to see the hardware. And there was like a line of people waiting to see it. And I just thought, oh my God, this is not a trade show. This is a cult. Like, we're all sitting here bowing down to these server idols. It was, I mean, more seriously, I'll tell you what really gave me pause in this is I came to the show looking for useful things to do with AI. Right? Anybody who's listening to the show knows I have a lot of questions about what we're all going to do with this AI. I think there's something coming, but I wanted to see if there's anything new, right? And I didn't need AGI. I didn't need huge advances. I just wanted to see new things. And I was in the software side of the NVIDIA booth, where they have all their partners and all the different demos of all their libraries and stuff set up. And look, I don't know about manufacturing systems or setting up supply chain software, but I do know a lot about telecom. And so I went to their telecom booth, panel display, and the demo they had in the booth was the exact same one they had last year. It was ray tracing modeling propagation of radio waves across an urban environment. It's cool, but it's the same demo as last year. In the keynote and in the Q&A, Jensen actually talked up several times this partnership they have with T-Mobile, Cisco, and Cerberus, making the radios, for their AI RAN, their 5G AI stuff. But none of that was actually in the booth. They had no pictures about it. They had no block diagrams. They claimed they had a demo running on their campus, and they showed these two speed meters with AI and without AI, but there was nothing there. And so I think what I was left with was all their talk about AI is a press release and last year's demo. Just nothing new. Same thing. I went over to the display on BioNemo, which is their drug discovery software, and again, very, very similar to last year's display. I don't know a ton about biotech, but my wife works in it, and I know from her that all the biotech companies, all the pharma companies are spending a lot of money on Nvidia gear and software. And most of what they're doing is around the edges, sort of, improving testing and simulation and cutting down costs here and there. But this idea of using AI to actually discover new drugs, it's not here yet. Maybe it'll come someday, but there's no progress. And I like, it was just this sense that I don't think Jensen's lying, and we'll talk about his keynote in a second, but I don't think Jensen's lying. I don't think the company's doing bad. I just think we're in this moment where AI is still needs to prove itself. And there wasn't a lot sort of changed my mind on that front this year.
Yeah. No, and I agree. And I think that, that actually is a relevant tie-in to what I think a goal of his was in the keynote, with, again, right, the caveat that he comes out and is like, hey, I'm unleashed. I got no script. Let's see where this goes. And you kind of already all right, let's buckle in and see how he's going to just freestyle this. And he clearly, I think if I'm interpreting his narrative arc, there was a couple of things he tried to do. He tried to basically, in his own technical way, because to some degree he's talking to engineers and to some degree he's not, really paint a picture of why does this shift to tokens matter? Because he spent a lot of time talking about the importance of the tokens. Then he sort of was like, if you understand how the tokenization of everything will work, then you realize that tokens equal money for a back-end engine, for software developers, right? So you're going to say, if I'm computing X number of tokens, I'm hoping that whatever my cost is, that somebody's willing to pay for value or a service of that from an economic standpoint. So there's the tying of the tokenization of everything, which is an inference point, which he sort of subtly got to, and then at the end of the day, sort of really hammering the idea of inference, is that's going to be money. So, all right, so why is that a hard problem? It's a hard problem because now that we move to reasoning models, this is tokens upon tokens. The AI is generating its own tokens to talk to itself, to work out problems, to do yada, yada, yada. Okay, so lots of tokens, lots of equaling money. So he set the stage there. Then he says, you need very complicated and sophisticated technology to do these things with tokens, to compute them quickly, to make them more affordable as models get distilled, to have faster inference speed so that robots or agents, AI agents, can talk to each other. So he started hitting that point. And then there was the news. Let's talk about news. We've got new foundational models. We've got an inference operating system. We've got Vera Rubin coming. I'm telling you, the next name is Feynman. And it was sort of like paint this big picture about we're the backbone of this new industrial era of software that will generate tokens and will make people money. We're like the backbone of revenue generation for all of you. Is really, I think, the point he wanted to make. And then here's our technology roadmap. Good luck catching up with the competitors. Good luck catching up with it, custom ASICs. We're way ahead of you. The industry is being built on us, for us, both behind in CapEx and in forward in CapEx. And so I was like, that's the arc I took away. I think there's some nuggets of this, but in his weaving and out, that's kind of where I would have put the landing moments of ahas that he was trying to hit in the keynote.
So my take on the keynote was that I said before, he was a little bit low energy, and I think that they were, I don't want to say defensive, but I'm used to Jensen gives a keynote and it's all forward-looking, big vision, incredible things. And I think there was a little degree here to where he was, again, they weren't being defensive, but they were, I think, in a mode of.
It was defensive. I think it was defensive.
It was a little bit more of the mode of the best defense is a good offense. And I think a lot of his comments, I see a lot of what he was talking about was responding to things that are happening in the market.
Yes, agreed.
As opposed to him usually like saying, this is what the market's going to be and we're going to be awesome at it. It was he talked a lot about inference. He pushed back really, really hard on ASICs in both implicitly in the keynote and explicitly in the investor Q&A, talking about custom ASICs and why they weren't going to be that competitive with him, with Nvidia. There was also all that talk about inference and 100x times compute needed to do reasoning. That was in part, I think, driven as a response to the whole DeepSeek meme, whatever we're going to call it, right? He's responding to things in a way that I think, again, they're not quite on their back foot, but they've definitely shifted their posture back a step. I think they've been kind of beaten up a little bit and they're responding to things, which is different for them.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. In fact, that was one of the things that like I walked away with was, this theme to me, or the posture feels like a defense of Nvidia, like what are we really doing here? And then again from his QA with us, which was not streamed like the financial analyst was, and the financial analyst QA, like it's very clear that he is frustrated that he doesn't think people understand Nvidia. Like I think he thinks like I get you know our products, but you don't really know what we're trying to do here, And I think I heard him 5 different times use different language to say Nvidia is this type of a company. Nvidia, like this is what we are. And he constantly changed it. And I'm like sitting there going, are you like we're struggling, like you're struggling to position Nvidia, and I understand, right? You don't want to be a GPU company. In fact, one of the things he said, and this I thought was a fascinating insight. He was talking about Grace Blackwell, and one of the industry analysts in our thing asked a question about GPU whatever volume whatever, and he goes, well, let's just break this down. What's a GPU? He goes over and he holds up Blackwell and he goes, this is not a GPU. It does not run graphics. It does not have shaders. It cannot do ray tracing. It is purpose-built for algorithms, AI algorithms, to handle those algorithms, to do matrix multiplication in accelerate matrix multiplication. And I just thought that was interesting because it just shows, like we say, they sell GPUs. He's saying they sell purpose-built accelerators for AI workloads. Like that's really what he's trying to say. And I can see how this is a frustration in the in his mind of who we are and what we do. But it's also like positioning Nvidia is not very easy. Like I think that's actually a challenging exercise, right, for him. But I thought I can sense this tension. I can sense him like really trying to figure out how to land, what this company is really after, and still just really struggling. And I think that's constantly clear with kind of how he keeps changing the language about what type of company is Nvidia.
I think that's interesting. I think you think about the history of Nvidia, they've been perennially for almost their entire history, they were the underdog. And only in the last 2 years have they shifted. And they didn't go, there was no middle step. They went from everybody laughs at us, everybody hates us, everybody ignores us, to now we're the king. Now we're the most dominant company in compute. I mean, that's a really, really rapid shift with nothing, no stops in the middle. And I can see how that would be a real struggle to now redefine yourself. Because for years, he had to make this argument, accelerated compute, or whatever he called it before, like accelerated. He's been trying to convince the world of accelerated compute is going to be a thing. Now it's clearly a thing. Okay, what does Nvidia stand for? They're, and I get it. It's a challenge.
So the other thing I thought was really interesting was when he was sort of going back and forth between, we're not an XPU company, we're not a GPU company. He didn't want to just limit and say like all we do is market or is manifest intelligence or manufacture intelligence, and but I agree. Like I get the sort of overlying frustration because it like I said, it isn't cut and dry, and then in the financial QA, he was like, man, you guys just do not understand this opportunity for AI factories. Nobody's modeling this. Not a single one of you. Nobody gets it. Your data center forecasts, they're all missing the point. There's a much bigger opportunity here. And I kind of just went off on them on think bigger, think more about like every company is going to need an AI factory. And I say all of this then realizing like, you know what? NVIDIA has never defined or articulated what exactly an AI factory is. They use this language, but they have not explained it to us. So it's kind of like, okay, I get that nobody's modeling this. They're just looking at data center sales and saying like, hey, well, the data center is going to be an AI factory. And that's not actually what he means if I unpack everything he's saying. And okay, well, why don't you guys explain this to us? Lay it out. Tell us what AI factories are. What do AI factories take? Like, what do you have to do to make an AI factory? What are those AI factories going to run? Are these on-prem for every organization? Because he used Tesla and GM as an example. He was like, they have their own AI factories. Okay, so does every enterprise need an AI factory? Okay, if that's true, that's interesting. Like, now we got to model non-cloud, data center hyperscalers. Right? It's like, so I say all of this to say, like, I get his frustration. At the same time, I think we are seeing them have to rediscover or reposition this company, and they haven't done the work to do it yet so that everybody can understand what exactly it is that they mean when they say these things. Because this is now, I mean, a couple of more than a year's worth of meetings where it's like he keeps trying to re-explain things in new ways, thinking like maybe I keep saying this, somebody will actually understand what we do or how big this opportunity is, and it hasn't been done cleanly.
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack in that. I think typical of his style or the whole company style for years has been, let's just throw things at the wall and see what sticks, right? And that's certainly what I consider the telecom stuff. Like, I don't think I don't think it's a zero, but I think it's just one of a couple dozen things they have working, and if it catches on, it'll be big. Right, and I think he's doing that same sort of experimental pitch with his messaging, and maybe that's not the right way to do it, because they're they don't have an identity crisis, but they do have to rethink their messaging for because they changed the world, and now what are they?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I do think there was a lot of like. He's trying to not go super in the weeds technically, but in some cases, I think he really should talk about like technology. And I'll just give you an example. Like back in the day when I used to go to NVIDIA's industry analyst events, which I've done since like 2003, when there was like 4 of us in the industry analyst because we were the only ones that covered gaming GPUs. They would say, we're releasing a new architecture. And when he said new architecture, he meant a new GPU design. It was how the blocks were laid up. It was a fundamental new approach. There was new shaders, like whatever. Now he's saying like we're releasing a new architecture and it's called Vera Rubin. And this is no longer a fundamental GPU foundational new architecture. This is the whole thing. It's a new Grace Blackwell. It's a new, better optimized, more cores GPU. It's Spectrum X. It's InfiniBand. It's NVLink. It's the rack, it's the memory. It's like all these things are upgraded, basically. And that to them is now how they're talking about architecture. And I sort of wish that they would at least explain that as well. Like, look, guys, this is our product. Our product is this. When we say we are making all of this new and all about any big architectural change, it means this. And that part, I think, is I think that would have been helpful, because then you could say, all right, now let's talk about the question he hates that came up in my industry analyst thing and the financial one, about custom ASICs, or specialized ASICs, as I think we should call them. And okay, so now the question is, if we understand architecture, not GPU, the question is not, is a GPU better than a specialized ASIC? The question is your architecture better than a customized or specialized ASIC? And that, I think, has much more merit technologically when you look at NVIDIA architecture the way that I just described it. It's all of the pieces. It is the full stack NVIDIA, not just the GPU. So I think that framing helps you look more broadly at them than just a GPU company, or just a company that makes accelerated compute and it's only the GPU. That's all that matters, because that's what he's trying to say. That's not all that matters. It's all of this that matters. And I think taking that technological and architectural approach, actually, there is a technological defense then against ASICs. It's not just the GPU. It's actually a whole lot more that goes into that. I'll stop ranting.
I mean, I don't want to come across as too negative, because I think look, I've been thinking about this stuff all week, right? You and I we're on a late Zoom call last night, and after that, I went out and wrote 2 pieces about it, because it's just been percolating in my brain all week. And I think this year's event, more than in past events, you took away from GTC depended very much on what you came into it with, right? In the past, I think we'd all go in and we'd be swayed by Jensen's powerful vision. This time, people were taking away very, very different things, right? And so I think the street clearly was disappointed, right? Because they have a 6 to 12 month time horizon, and there wasn't anything in the keynote that would alter their conclusions. So the stock sells off, right? I think if you were an Nvidia competitor, or including the hyperscalers, you were worried about Nvidia as your main threat going into the show. You came away much more worried about them. But if we just sort of take a step back and look at Nvidia not as a stock, but as a company, they're doing really well, right? They're doing really well. If you're an employee there, you've done a good job this year, right? They're executing tremendously well. I mean, they published a 3-year roadmap publicly. I mean, that's really, really rare to be that public about something. You're committing to something publicly 3 years in the future, which is, I mean, that's a big deal. And you wouldn't do that if you didn't have a really high degree of confidence that you could actually deliver that. And that's impressive. I mean, one of the things I noticed is, as an analyst, I would count press releases from companies, right? And this year, they put out only 19 press releases ahead of GTC. And you look at the last show, it was like 26, and the one before that, it was 34. And so the Wall Street part of my brain, and I guarantee there are people out there doing this, will look at that and go, oh, 34 down to 19 in 2 years, that's 50%, almost 50% reduction. Next year, there's only going to be 9 press releases, right? Okay, that's mathematically a line. But they put out 19 press releases. Like 19 press releases just for the show. The amount of work that just went into the press release, let alone the work that actually is behind those press releases, is immense. 19 press releases is a huge number, right? And you know what? If next year or next show they only do 9 press releases, that's still a big number, right? And I think we lose sight of it. This is a company that is doing many, many things, and they seem to be doing most of them pretty well. And it gets lost in all the different ways we view it. So I think they deserve credit for that. Even if their size now dictates a sort of a new, we have to view them in a new light.
Yeah. No, and I get that, and there was a ton of announcements, and don't get me wrong, and as I think you rightly pointed out, right, there is the market perception. There is the, wider non-engineer, non-Nvidia customer, non-AI scientist view. And then there's all those people who show up in hordes because what Nvidia is doing is valuable to them. Like an entire, like I said, they are the backbone of this industry, of software, of those that are going to make robots, of those that are going to be making, fully self-driving cars, right? I think a lot of these moments of full autonomy and the software stack. In fact, to be honest with you, like I'm shocked of all the different ways I heard Jensen say Nvidia is this type of a company. I'm shocked he didn't say Nvidia is a software company, because he spent so much time in our meeting talking about software, all the software that, and I literally thought you're gonna say you're gonna end this rant with Nvidia as a software company, because he would constantly do a rant. You know what? Nvidia is a blah 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 blah. You know what? Nvidia is a, and so I thought sure, you should say it, Nvidia, and he never actually said it. So I'm shocked, because they make a ton of software that unlocks that hardware, and he needs that point to be made, but he doesn't want to say we're a software company.
I'm pretty sure he tried that out in 23.
But did he say software company? Okay,
I think he did. I think
we'll
he did.
To double check.
But to my earlier point, he's tried it before, and he's like, oh, it didn't. Maybe it didn't work.
At the end of the day. Go ahead.
I would say I think that one actually got him into trouble with some of the big hyperscalers, because that's kind of what their business is, and they didn't like hearing that.
That's a good point. I was going to say technically every semiconductor company is actually a software company, but that's splitting hairs.
I can think of a few who maybe aren't, but topic for a different day.
Okay, difference between exceptionally good at software and the reality that you have to write software to make silicon. So, okay. But, I don't know. I walked away from this, like, really feeling like it's really hard to not be super bullish about them over the long haul. I feel like, to be honest with you, so the other session we had that was just for us, which was awesome, was with Bill Daly, who's the head of R&D. And you listen to this guy talk about how much investment effort is going into R&D efforts for all these things: robotics, for automotive, for future factory, for AI, for silicon co-optics, for silicon photonics. And I'm like, even if we just separated the idea that where are the hyperscalers going to do this level of R&D for their custom silicon, they're 100% not. And Nvidia is, but Nvidia is spending all this money to solve these future problems, and that their R&D might actually be one of the best defenses against others competitively, not named AMD or others, but the custom specialized ASICs. And I always thought, like, this is an underappreciated story. Literally, how much work they're doing in R&D.
So I heard those comments too, not in that session, but a few other times. And it made me think, it gave me this weird deja vu, because Jensen made several times, he made strong arguments why his accelerated AI chips are better than custom, whatever we're calling them, from the hyperscalers.
Yep.
And the arguments he put forth for that, which you just outlined, like we're doing all this research, we're going to be better at this. This is all we do, is make these chips better. You have to run a search engine. You have to run software. You have to run
YouTube. Teams, Office
YouTube,
365, Amazon,
everything's right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like this is what we do. We're going to be better at it. That's exactly the argument that merchant chip vendors have been making for 40 years, right? We're just going it's a pendulum. It moves back and forth, and we've done an awful lot on the custom internal silicon stuff, and it feels like we might be moving, or he makes a very strong case for why it's going to shift back towards merchant. I think this is a little different. I'm sure we'll come back to this, but he's making the argument that I heard many companies make. Like Intel made this argument in the 80s, and Qualcomm made it in the 2000 teens. Like, there's nothing new under the sun.
Agree, and I'd say it this way, and I don't think, as everybody who's listened to this, like, we're not poo-pooing custom/specialized ASICs. That's going to exist. They are 100% scaling those efforts, right? No doubt. I think though what he did, in my opinion, is I think he successfully defended Nvidia's role. And again, I'm not going to call it a GPU, but we're going to say like these specialized Nvidia. We're going to say the Nvidia architecture. He successfully defended the Nvidia architecture for at least the next 5 years, in my opinion, if not slightly longer. Over to the 10 to 15 year horizon, maybe, right? It's mature, software's mature, specialized ASICs become like software's not changing enough, and so those are fine. Maybe. But I think over the short arc of time, I don't think we're gonna see the Nvidia architecture threatened by custom ASICs, specialized ASICs, at any significant share volume. Dollars, yes, because it's freaking expensive. I saw a report about how much front side design is per chip, and it's like almost $400. Like in some cases, some of those chips were $600. Like that's a lot of money if you're gonna put 2 million TPUs out there. So anyway, that's my. I think they've defended that for at least the foreseeable future.
He said, it was interesting. He put up a slide, I think during the keynote, showing how many Blackwell units they're going to ship this year. However, we're going to define Blackwell units, 1 chip or 2 or whatever. And I think it was 3.6 million Blackwell units are going to ship this year.
I thought that was already, though, not this year, because the financial analysts picked that up. It's like 3. He said something about order numbers are already 3.6.
Right. So that's what he said, and that caused a lot of confusion because the investment numbers, the street numbers, are higher by a lot. Well, not by a lot, but they're higher. And in the Q&A, he clarified. He said, "This is just the CSPs, the cloud scale providers."
And is that for the year or just as of now?
Orders for this year.
Okay.
Orders for this year, right?
That's already a lot more GPUs than last year. Just to make everybody know, but so be it.
Not GPUs.
Sorry. Yes, thank you, Jay. Nvidia architecture. That is more Nvidia architecture than last year. Yeah.
That's right. It's a lot of orders for not GPUs. But then in like the analysts sort of got him to explain it more. And one of the things he pointed out was this is just the public service providers. So that's AWS, Azure, and GCP. It doesn't include. He's not including Google, like TPU in that. He's not including Facebook in that. He made that distinction between the cloud service providers and big internet companies.
Others, yeah.
And I picked up on that because this is something you and I have talked about repeatedly, which is there's a big difference between the cloud service providers and big internet companies when it comes to their demand for chips, because their software needs are different. They have different outlooks. And so I thought I thought that I felt a little validated by that. But another thing that he pointed out, which I think was interesting, was he said that demand for Blackwell was very strong. Everyone's dying for compute, and they're ripping product allocation out of each other's hands. That's what he said. Ripping it out of each other's hands.
How do you do that?
And so, well, I think you sort of hear that and you're like, oh, that's just hyperbole, right? I've actually been on allocation discussions. I think he is referring to something that happened to him recently, where one salesperson was arguing with another salesperson, and they had to have him decide whether it's hyperscaler 1 or hyperscaler 2 gets the chips. Like I really believe that those arguments are taking place. It resonated with me. I think there's some personal something that happened to him personally where he's like thinking like and he's right. It's a very strong sign of demand when everyone is fighting over allocation, and everybody, the salespeople and the purchasing people at the chip companies, at the internet companies, are sort of gaming the system to get whatever they can.
Yeah.
And it's certainly a sign of continued strong demand there.
Yep. And I don't think that's the question. And again, just to make this competitive point on, I think like one of the first things we said when we talked about Nvidia in our early days of the circuit relative to competition, everybody says they want an alternative. Yet there's still a gigantic line out the door right. And customers fighting on the floor for Nvidia architecture. And that has not changed in 2 years that we've been talking about this.
That's right. $40 billion a quarter argues otherwise.
Yeah. All right. That was meaty. My head's already still like spinning from so much of went on. I mean, literally between our meeting, which was 90 minutes, and the 90 minutes of the financial meeting, I got a lot of Jensen rambling and explaining things. It was a lot.
I know that feeling.
Well, and sometimes it's like you're listening for the little nugget. He's going to say one thing that's a toss-away remark.
Oh, yeah.
That maybe not.
Yeah.
And so like I'm sitting there like, what is it? You said thinking tokens. You've never said thinking tokens before. What's a thinking token? It's like all these notes I have. And so, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. You know, sort of as an aside, what's interesting to me, and this again goes to what you were saying at the intro, was the show has gotten so big that it's become a center of gravity. And I noticed there were another dozen companies who held events in the Valley this week to piggyback on the fact that all the customers and all the analysts and everybody is going to be in town.
Yep.
And it's a social event of the year.
Yeah, TensorWave Cloud held the Beyond CUDA Summit. I had a bunch of friends that went to that, told me about that. There was, a lot of side events and like a lot of the industry, a lot of the ecosystem around Nvidia showed up asking us for meetings. You know, people making AI servers, people making, a part of the memory supply chain, people a part of the substrate. Like people were like, we're a part of this. Like, come see, what we're doing. Let us fill you in. So like, it's weird. It's weird, Jay, because like I said, I've never seen anything this big like this before. I to be honest with you, I think Apple's would be as big if it was a public event and it wasn't invite only, but that's a different thing. It's almost like the same gravitas as CES, where everybody just shows up because it's an ecosystem. It's it's a center, like you said, it's a center of gravity that pulls in the whole wide swath of the again, and just take this for what it will. Take what you told me earlier, where like people were lined up to see Grace Blackwell's like it was the Mona Lisa. Like that has to tell you this company is in a dominant position for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah. And for me, it resonated a lot because like 2 weeks ago, I was bemoaning the lack of relevance for Mobile World Congress. And people kept asking me like, what show is going to replace it? And GTC was sort of top of my list. GTC and Computex were sort of top of my list in terms of density of influence and power that's going to take place in a confined setting. I think those have become the really centers of innovation in this front.
I propose, and I know there's some Nvidia folks in comms who listen to this show. I propose we call it NTC, the Nvidia Technology Conference. You heard it here first, folks, on the circuit.
I was going to go with the AI Robotics Technology Conference.
Yeah, but see,
AirTC.
But I think I don't think he wants to be isolated to that. Like, I think you look into him talk about, you know what the other thing he said? We're talking about robotics, and he goes, we like, think about robotics. We have a labor shortage. By the end of this decade, we're 50 humans short. And I'm like, we ain't going to have 50 million robots by the end of 2030. So that's still a problem, apparently. And now I'm freaking out about this. I didn't realize there's a true labor shortage that we're not going to get to. So it's just those little things. Who says that? You know what? We're going to be short 50 million humans. Okay. Great. We're not going to have 50 million robots, but I understand you're trying to say, like, there's going to be a lot of robots, and NVIDIA's going to be there. Great. No, NTC, everybody, the NVIDIA Technology Conference. That's my vote.
All right. Got my vote. Sounds good.
All right. You also briefly, as a part of this ecosystem that we were talking about, the Gravitas, attended a forum with Synopsys. Maybe just give us a little...
Yeah, I mean, so Synopsys held their user group. I don't know what it stands for, but they call it SNUG.
SNUG.
Their 35th SNUG. Their user conference. Super interesting event. At some point soon, we need to talk more about EDA. It's really hard story to tell. It's really complicated. It gets very, very technical very, very quickly when you delve into what they do. But interesting stuff. I think we'll come back to that because I think Synopsys they had a lot of interesting things to say as well and very well attended. So good event there. We need to explore this more, and everyone needs to figure out how to talk about EDA coherently.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot changing here. In fact, like when we had Artagius on, if anybody remembers that, the founder and former CEO of Synopsys, like one of the points, right, that he really hit on was just how the complexity of design, and part of this I think will skew toward chiplets, another subject we should talk about a lot. When you move to disaggregated design, it's just far more complicated, and you have to have these rich EDA tools to help you optimize this design, because it's not like in a monolithic era, it's not that was easy. You still needed it. But in the non-monolithic era, you need it even more. You need these innovations, and there's only a handful of companies, helping do EDA design, right, at a fundamental first principle. So
yeah, let's come back to it. Art, by the way, was at Snug, walking around. He would go from talking to executives and senior customers to taking selfies with everybody.
Yeah, he's great.
Yeah,
we love Art. All right, everybody, thanks for listening. Appreciate your time. As always, send us your comments, critiques, clarifications if we got something wrong. I always appreciate those. We don't normally get something wrong, but I'm happy to be corrected. And we will talk to you next week.
Thank you, everybody. Tell your friends.